There you go. Uh, Again, welcome to Latina Voices in Tech. My name is Jessica Perry. This is Ricard, and we have Jody Collins. I would love to introduce Stephanie Chavez Alvarez, who's one of our voices today. She is a seasoned senior technical delivery manager. And we also have us presenting Erika Costales. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I'd be horrible. Who is a manager at CalPERS over at HR technology and human capital management systems. But don't let me step in the way there. I'll let them kind of get a little bit deeper into their backgrounds. But before we get right into that, it's so great to have everyone here tonight as a kind of spotlight for Mexican Heritage Month, and also kind of wrapping up Dia de los Muertos. I know that women in tech in general is a very, very small portion of representation in technology, and also for Latinas in general, it's even smaller. 2% of jobs actually are held by Latinas in STEM. So it's really great to see you guys come out here and show representation and talk about how we can, better ourselves and put ourselves out there. So let me first introduce Stephanie, and she'll kind of go right into a little bit about herself.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining. I really appreciate it. Jessica, thank you for inviting me. I was lucky to find her in another of my chats. So I was like, yeah, I got super excited to be here. I'm going to tell a little bit about myself. I'm Mexican. I was born and raised in Mexico. I was born in Mexico City, and then I moved to a little place called Guadalajara. I've been in tech for over 17 years. I do not have a tech background. Well, I don't have a tech degree. I do have a very technical background now that I think about it. I studied international business administration. And actually, I started my career in supply chain, and well, destiny brought me into tech. I was always very interested in tech, and for some reason I wasn't able to get there. So eventually life took me into tech. I have been in banking, security, different types of companies like IBM, Hewlett-Packard. I then moved to Canada. I was able to work in Vancouver in a company that was kind of like related to health in the government. And then I moved to the States, and right now I'm working at Activision, which is a gaming company. And I speak English, Spanish, French, and Portuguese. I love to talk. So you can see that the more I can learn and the more ways I have to communicate with people, I would just love to do that. And I am just very, very grateful to be here. And if anything that I have done, any of my mistakes, if anything that has worked for me works for you, it will be more than a dream come true.
All right, thank you so much. Wow, 4 languages, holy moly. That's a lot. Well, we are so happy to have you here, Stephanie. And we can't wait to dive into your experiences, and hopefully, a lot of people can take away from that. All right, and let me introduce also Erika. Hi, Erika.
Hi, I don't know if I want to go after Stephanie now. I only speak English fluently and Spanish cuando quiero. Cuando me conviene, that's what I tell. That's what I say.
Don't worry, me too. I think
when I need to, yeah. No, yeah. I mean, a lot of jobs, a couple of my jobs required that I speak Spanish when I was in the restaurant industry, so I had to learn my gaps pretty fast. So yes, Erika Costales. My family is from Mexico. I was born here in California, but I'm very proud of my background and my family's roots. I currently am the manager, as Jessica had said, at CalPERS for the state of California. My background is more in data analysis, DEI data, HR systems. So I've always kind of been working with IT and kind of being that liaison in between. I feel like I'm speaking two languages there, where, you know, I could speak enough IT to get the job done, but I can speak enough of like DEI and HR, where I could help those two groups talk to each other. I've always found in IT that they're very good at what they do, but they find it difficult to speak our language, you know, or whoever their customer is, because they're usually implementing something or fixing something, or, you know, streamlining something for their customers. So I felt like I kind of just fell into that by needing IT's help with a lot of my data was getting too heavy for Excel and moving to Power BI. So there was lots of conversations on how to work with IT. So I continually work with IT every day. I'm more in that liaison field, and I learn enough about IT to be able to understand what they're doing. And I'm always trying to find solutions with technology and not recreate any wheels. So yeah, that's kind of a little bit about me.
Wow, that's awesome. I love having that perspective, because I feel like when you're really in it and you're just trying to find solutions, I think you kind of miss that representation. And I'm really glad that, you know, there's someone like you who could provide that kind of perspective. So that's honestly really, really cool. Alrighty, well, let's dive into it a little bit deeper. And you guys can chime in whenever, whoever wants to go first, you know, no big deal. But can you guys tell us a little bit about what inspired you to pursue your careers in technology, or how you even got here initially? You know, I know there's a lot of different pathways. I know, Stephanie, you said you're following more a non-traditional path. So yeah, like, kind of let's dive into that.
Yeah, for me it was very funny because I was born in the 80s. So no internet, we barely had computers there. And I was very excited and very into it, but because I was already studying and working when I was in high school, I realized that I wasn't going to be able. I studied in a public university, so I knew that I wouldn't be able to have a tech degree and work at the same time, and I kind of needed that income. So I was like, okay, I'll just study international business. My dad studied something similar and he traveled a lot. So I was like, okay, I'll do that. Eventually, well, I never traveled because of my company or anything when I was in supply chain, but it did taught me a lot. Like, I did teach me a lot. I remember I used to do production floor. I used to go into the warehouse. I used to do importing, exporting, claims. So you start having to really learn how to talk to different people, as Erika was saying. Yeah, that's key. Sometimes when you're in tech, you really have to be able to talk to super tech guys, but also to people that they don't understand why are you taking 10 months in one solution, right? And sometimes you have to sell. I am a good seller. I think that's in me. And I think that's why I'm a good project manager, program manager, delivery manager. It's kind of like the same path. I'm always trying to sell the idea to my engineers, like, hey, it's amazing. Let's do this feature. And we only have 2 months and we have no budget and it's fine. And then I go to my VPs and I'm like, hey, like, this is the solution that you want, but the reality, this is what works. So we need a little bit of this. So it's a lot of negotiation. I think that my Mexican in me helps me a lot because I'm very Latina, I'm very loud, I always try to use humor because everything is so, I have the pleasure to work with amazing and great engineers. Most of the times I am the only woman in the floor. So sometimes it can be intimidating for them. So I'm like, what can I do? So I try to make it fun. I try to make it light. One day I was still in supply chain, and a friend of mine, I was a birthday. He and his wife are software engineers, and they were project managers at the time for Bank of America. And they were hiring. So they told me, hey, they're hiring in my company and you will be an amazing project manager. And why don't you apply? To be honest, I didn't know what was project management. I didn't really know much about tech. So I was like, okay, I'll do my best. I investigated. I got the job. So then it's like fake it till you make it, right? I was the only one that was not a software engineer, that had no idea. They hired like 10 people at the same time. But I always think that it's in your attitude, and attitude sometimes triumph aptitude. Because maybe you don't know it in that moment, but if you have the right mindset and if you're consistent, you're gonna get there. So I would just study a lot. I will try to ask for, hey, how can I? Most of the times I bring my help first, like, hey, I can help you do this. People hate to document, so I would be like, I'll document for you, but can you explain to me what is change management? And I always take a lot of respect for people's time. So whenever I ask something, I try not to ask for it again. That's how I got into tech. I love it. I love the fact that for me, it was very interesting because I've been in SAP, in networking, in hardware, in software. I've done waterfall, I've done Scrum, Agile. At some point, people were telling me, like, you have pivoted so much that you're not an expert on anything. And I was like, a project manager has to be able to be anywhere. That's my superpower. So when people told me this is not gonna work, I was like, it's gonna work. And at the end of the day, the core of all of them was security, because I have been working for the government, for banking, now gaming. So at the end of the day, it helped me a lot to have that mindset. And I think that you have to trust yourself. You have to also do what you like to do, because when you like what you're doing, you're just motivated, you're just excited. I thrive in chaos and in mess. Normally they call me like a crisis manager, because they were always like, okay, we have this project, it hasn't worked. They bring me in, okay, now you have 2 weeks to figure it out. So I'm like, okay. But it's fun because I think it's about attitude, as I was saying. And also, I am very humble. Even though I have been doing this for 17 years, I always raise my hand. Hey, maybe I don't understand this well. This is what I'm gonna do. Maybe I always try to bring solutions. I think that's kind of why I haven't. Sometimes it's like, how can a woman be in tech? Well, sometimes you have to be so good that they cannot ignore you, right? You have to provide those solutions.
Comes from. No, I totally understand that.
And then you just get hired, and then they're like, okay, they don't see me as a Stephanie or whatever, they just see me as a TDM. So I think that's kind of how I got into tech, why I am super excited about tech. Tech is so changing, like it changes every day. You cannot get bored. You can never be in status quo because there's always something new. So that's why I'm in tech. I love it. I tell everybody, come to tech because it's fun.
All right. And I mean, I totally agree. There's so many different ways you can go, and it's definitely like a lot of fun once you get in. And I think that's like a big inspiring thing is especially as a project manager, you get to be in like a whole bunch of different things. But kind of pivoting, Eric, what inspired you in your career and in your background? Was there any like anybody who is in tech in your family or anything like that? Like definitely dive in.
Well, my husband's in IT, so that kind of helps. But he does like, like tech help, like, help desk. He's a lot of troubleshooting with hardware. He was the one that actually encouraged me to apply at CalPERS. So we both work at CalPERS. So convenient for carpooling. So that's great. But I think it wasn't really because he's encouraged me. I think it's just the work that I've done. I kind of fell into the tech world. I was a single mom. I was going to school, working like 2 or 3 jobs, going to Sac State to get my business degree. Originally wanted to graduate and have like my own restaurant. That was like my goal, right? But you know how goals go and like things that you say you want to do, right? Like, I graduated when the economy was going pretty south. So probably wasn't the best time to try to open up a restaurant. So because I got a student assistant job with the state. They had a job opening in the civil rights office, and there wasn't a whole lot of job opportunities. I needed something stable. So again, single mom, just try to get, something that I could be, that would give me some flexibility and like a consistent income. I had health benefits, my parents, had both retired from the state. They worked at CDCR corrections. So I kind of just was like, okay, I'll take it, and just ended up working again with a lot of data, census data. I started producing big census reports. And again, like I had said earlier, I started breaking Excel because there was just too much data. So started working in Power BI, started working with IT, saying, hey, like, I have all this data I need to analyze every single year. It's just me. There's no way I can like churn out this amount of data. Is there anything you guys can do? Here's some of the data sets that I was working with. So got them to help me, and then learned Power BI. Somebody just kind of helped me, and learned a little bit of DAX in the background to be able to get Power BI to do what I needed it to do.
And you learned all this while on the job and while
mhm.
oh wow.
Yeah, it was just kind of like, I was a program manager over a program, so I didn't have a team of staff for me. So it was either I needed the system to help me, or I was going to drown in Excel. So somebody knew Power BI, and they were willing to sit down and like teach me a little bit of it. And then I was writing, kind of as Stephanie said, like I didn't want to ask too many questions. So I was like documenting and being like, okay, I want to learn this. This is kind of, it becomes fun once you get past like the hurdles of the ugly data. Then I was able to build dashboards, and then you can analyze something once you can digest it. If it's too big and you don't have technology to help you, you're just kind of in it, but you can't make any sense of it. It's like spaghetti, right? So I was doing I had to do my own accessibility. So I had to learn a little bit about HTML and, post things online. Like, very small agency that I was at that time. They didn't have anybody that did anything. You had to kind of learn on your own, but that was good. So I said yes to everything, and I looked for technology to help me. And as long as it was like a free product, which that's probably why I got into Power BI, because it was free at the time, I used it, and it helped a lot. I was able to actually start analyzing the data. And then in my current role, that's kind of how I got into data and technology and working with IT. And now in my current role, I've been at for 4 years at CalPERS. I oversee all HR systems. So any systems that HR uses, I'm that liaison in between IT. So I'm in those meetings. I may not use the system, but I make sure that there's feeds and connections. And if there's updates or IP addresses updates, that I'm involved in, that there's testing, and that things don't break. Things have broken, but I know the people to call, right? Like, hey, this isn't working, or this got updated. Nobody said anything to us. So who do I need to get on the line to get this up and running? So sometimes you just learn by figuring it out. And then
we're good at that, right?
yeah.
I think just the fray.
I think a lot of what Stephanie said is, you just kind of go by learning and kind of being thrown into the fire, and then you just kind of like survival mode kind of it, so now I'm over, I oversee we use PeopleSoft. We're going to be moving into Oracle Cloud, but so that's our human capital management system. So I have the admin on my team. So like a team of like 6 people. And so I'm constantly going into the system. There's always weird hiccups, but I feel like I'm like a detective, and I'm like, oh, this is annoying. Like, this isn't a system issue. Like, somebody keyed this in wrong, and I will spend like a good hour, 2 hours. But when you figure out that resolution, and you're like, I knew it. I knew there was something weird about this one. Like, this isn't normal. Like, then you can fix it. We have test environments, so we can go into our test environments and try out our solutions without breaking the actual production site. So I always go in there and play around. It's like our playground. And then we get, then we're like, okay, it worked, you guys, let's go put it in a prod. So I like helping my team, help troubleshoot with them. I'm a manager that gets my hands dirty. I can do what they can do. They can do what that I can do. So we can always pick up where we need to. But I love what I do now. And I'm challenged every day. I mean, it's stressful. It's a lot of work, but I want to get a little bit more into the IT realm now that I've been exposed to it. I feel like I could move over into that area a little more. But for right now, I really want to get this new human capital management system launched in my HR team, because it's going to be like the new and shiny thing in our team. So it'll really improve more things that we we're having an outdated system. So with the state, everything's usually old. So anytime you get something new and shiny, you want to stick around until it's like up and ready to go. So, but
Oh,
yeah,
no.
I mean,
Yeah, I get
it's fun. It's fun, exhausting, but it's fun. Like you have that energy to still get up every day and like want to go back to work.
No, that's amazing. Like, I can totally vibe off of that. I don't know if anyone here has participated in the Women Who Code hackathon, but launching and seeing your project come to life is probably like the number one thing. And even if anyone here who's like a beginner, I don't know how satisfying it was for me individually when I typed my first hello world. So but that's neither here nor there. But anywho, so we have really two great point of views, and you guys have a very, very good hold on what you do within your specific roles. I want to dive just a little bit deeper and I want to know like how you feel your voice, and just you representing your background, and then also just coming from a non-traditional background, coming from a traditional background, like how you feel that is really being heard in your positions. How did you find kind of that balance of putting forth your I'm so sorry, I'm trying to find the words. trying to find a balance between staying true to your goals, but also wanting to show up and really, really make a difference in the tech that you're participating in.
I'll go first. I think that for me, something that has always driven me is I'm very critical of myself, which is something that I'm working on. But I always want to do everything the best way possible. And even then, sometimes it's not enough. And that's something that I've learned, that as women, sometimes we try too much and we want to do too much. And the reality is that we also have to change that mindset. And that's something that I've been learning lately, is that we do deserve to be heard because we have a voice and because we are not fighting anything. There's statistics where men, they just go and with facts and they ask for raises, and women in general, we tend to not do it and feel kind of bad about it and try to justify it. And I feel that that's something that it's changing with me. I have been reading some books like Invisible Women and how women rise, and I think it's very interesting to also share have these forums. I think that I really appreciate you, Women Who Code, for hosting this, because we can hear other people, and sometimes when you don't feel like you're the only one, it's like, okay, it's good to feel like this, but then what are we going to do about it? And some people tell me, how can I get to break those paradigms that you have I don't have that personality, I don't have that drive, I don't want to be a trailblazer. I'm sorry. My first language is Spanish.
No, you're totally fine. And you know what? If you want to throw in a little Spanglish, I think
I will. In a minute, when I start feeling more nervous. No, but the reality is that I always tell them it's not the times that you fail, it's the times that you stand up. And the reality is that when we start seeing those situations as learning experiences, then it's good. Just don't do the same mistake twice. I think that's important. Another thing is that something that I have learned and I have done, and it has worked for me, is that I have created my own opportunities. I started advocating for myself, because sometimes you can try, you can be your best, you can be the best resume, and you're just not getting the job. I am an immigrant, and I've been twice an immigrant, like when I went to Canada and here. And the reality is that everything didn't work, doesn't count. You have to start from zero. And it's like, okay, it's a feeling of I was here and now nobody knows I exist. And the reality is that, okay, if it's not there, what can I do? I think that it's okay to feel it, to suffer it, but one day I go, right, whatever. And then I'm like, okay, let's wake up. What are we going to do? Action, right? There must be something that you can do. And that's something that I always tell people when they're like, okay, I don't have experience. And they're asking me for experience, that's a dilemma, right? So how do I do that? The reality is that there are sacrifices and you have to make them consciously. Sometimes you have to get into a job and they pay you less, but you want a foot on the door, and then you will do whatever you want, right? Or sometimes really you cannot get a job because you're or whatever, and you create your own company and then you make it software. So then you have that experience, and then, well, I'm here, right? So I think that's something that I have and I've done, and it has worked for me. And sometimes I share it and it has worked for other people. So I would say that's for me.
Thank you so much. That was great. Let's see, another question. I want to find it a little bit easier. Let's see. So what advice would you give to individuals, especially career changers, who want to aspire for a successful career and they feel like these types of barriers, are just like too scary? I know there's a lot of, I know when I first thought about getting into tech, I never thought it was for me. I always thought like, oh, I'm just gonna get a job and that's that. And then it can be any job. It doesn't have to be the stars kind of job. So so what would you give to someone who is just starting out and who wants to have a successful career?
Yeah, I'm like, do you want me to answer?
No, it's her.
Like,
Go ahead. Yeah.
I don't want to monopolize.
No, it's fine. I think just finding, kind of how Stephanie was saying, like that find your foot in the door, right? Like it may not be your ideal job in the technology world, but it could get you a connection, or you could learn a little something. Like, again, none of my jobs were IT positions, but I feel like I've learned a lot just being that liaison and listening and asking questions. I've even been in meetings with IT where I could tell I was asking enough questions to understand, where I was coming back with valuable feedback, and they appreciated that, instead of just saying, yeah, just go with what you think IT, and then it fails and then you have to come back to them anyways, and you have this struggle of like, well, I asked you for this, and they're like, no, you specifically asked for this. And having that, I've had IT people saying like, can you just make sure you're in the meeting because you understand enough to help us get to the next step. And some people like that were there were not making that connection with them, and it was frustrating. So I was like, okay, cool, like I'm actually understanding some of this IT language, and I didn't really know too much about it before. So I think taking a job that is just opening yourself up to maybe data or IT, or that may not be your traditional IT class, if you're kind of struggling in that area. But and then just talk and network to people, get to know other people in the IT world. Kind of like these forums are great. You get to know what people's paths are that may not be as traditional, knowing that everybody started with an IT degree and a master's and a PhD. I know I have an amazing leadership that are all female for 3 levels, which is great. Not only that,
Wow.
but they're like amazing people that are my mentors. So if you can find like that
Wow.
strong leadership, it's nice, because I'm in HR, so there's a lot more females. But it's given me the strength and the confidence that I know if I go into a male dominated field a little more, that I've built that confidence. I've seen how they've communicated with rooms full of males, and there's a different presence you almost kind of have to have. I've seen men where they're like, they don't take us seriously, or we're HR women. And once we learn our stuff and we can talk back to them and say, well, actually, when you talk about this, and this isn't really fit what we've asked for, and we asked for this criteria and these requirements, and we're not getting what we asked for, then they start to respect you a little more, because they see that you've done your homework and you studied to know enough that they'll come back and have like more of a serious conversation with you. So, it took extra work, it took extra, time that I didn't get paid for, but it paid off in the end, because then I was able to move up and feel confident about those conversations with people that I normally would get intimidated. And then once I realized what they know, I'm like, it's not even that bad. Like, I don't know why I put these people on pedestals. Like they're like some kind of superheroes, right? That like, but once I figure it out, I'm like, okay, well, I could have totally done that. So having that confidence to move forward and I ask a ton of questions, because asking questions helps me understand. And then that way I don't have to ask them later on when they expect me to know, if I've been there long enough. So
Yeah. And you know what? That's a really, really good point. I think like a lot of times we come into these spaces and we just see these people who have, so much, even other women. Sometimes I see other women and I go, oh my God, she's been here for X amount of time and she has so much knowledge, and she's just, shoulders back, head straight, like, so how do I get there? And you end up putting them all the way up there, and to the point where, you kind of shrink yourself in the same space. So no, that was a really, really, really great point. Let's see, do we have any questions in the chat that we would like to touch on? I know we're getting close.
Yeah, I see one question. Let me just read that to Erika and Stephanie, and then anyone can go ahead and help with the question. So Marisol asks that she is transitioning from social services to tech last year, but she is starting small, and right now she's doing red teaming and data labeling in Gen AI, and she loves the exposure. So, and she's also learning front-end web development with a boot camp, and she is seeking any advice you guys have for someone like her who is just starting their journey.
I think that whatever you're studying, it's super good to have that preparation, to have like a plan. I'm a planner, I'm a project manager, so I always need a plan. And even though I know that no plan will ever be perfect, I have a plan, because otherwise, I love Alice in Wonderland. If you don't have a plan, well, any path will take you, right? So I always tell my mentees, think about your dream job. Who would you want to be? Which job would you like to get? What skills does that person have? And start building there, because the more knowledge you have, the more confident you are. As Erika was saying, I have the knowledge, I can have these conversations, I'm confident. Why? Because I know what they're talking about. And also asking questions, as Erika was saying, nobody should feel bad about asking questions. Sometimes we're like, no, I should know everything, and you feel intimidated. No, the more you ask, people should share that. And also it helps you. Okay, so now I have this clear understanding. Let's work like this, right? Let's be open. Another thing that I liked a lot about Erika, and I haven't had for myself, I just recently got a mentor and I'm very excited about it, but I think that's why I'm so into mentorship, because I never had that. I always kind of had to figure it out by myself. So reach out to people, get a mentor. There are a lot of platforms. I do mentorship in different platforms, and it's always good for people that are in mentorships already. It means that they're fired by helping and by being there. And sometimes, as Erika was saying, also, I think it's super important. Like when she was mentioning this, I was like, yeah, this is key, networking. You have the exposure, so that's amazing. Part of that exposure, there's some responsibility. You have to be prepared. You have to give your 100% every time that you have those meetings where they're seeing you, where you have that exposure. But also go reach out to different people. I'm always talking to anybody that would want to talk to me, because there's something that you can learn, either if it's good or bad. Or sometimes also something that I've learned, you need people. So somebody told me this, and you need someone to have that voice in those important questions. Someone that is like, maybe Stephanie is good for this role. So by doing those things, like sometimes volunteering, sometimes doing extra work, it does pay off at the end of the day.
Awesome, great insight. And then looks like we have, I think, another.
I wanted to ask, sorry to interrupt you, Jessica, but I just wanted to ask Erica if she wanted to add something to whatever Stephanie said. She
Yeah, she
definitely gave
covered
amazing
a
advice,
lot.
almost everything.
I know. I was thinking like volunteering, just to get to know more people in that industry, if that's what you're interested in, just talking to people, asking, hey, can I have a quick coffee, or a lunch or something, can we go for a walk for 10 minutes? I just have a couple things to ask. And there was one other thing I was going to say about, and if there's anything like in your job that they offer for free training, learning, Google, go to YouTube, a lot of that stuff is free, but in these groups too, you can find other free things that are available through, universities and stuff like that. So I think just trying to take those extra time, schedule, maybe an hour or two every week to dedicating to learn a little bit more about what you're trying to reach towards. And, even taking an extra class in it, if you think, certifications, those are helpful too. So I think you're in the right direction. Depending on how fast you want to go into IT, then I think it just depends on getting those applications out there and making those connections. And I always tell people, don't get discouraged if you don't get the first job or the second job, third job. You get better at interviews, you get better applications. There's no time that you've wasted in applying for those jobs. There's been a couple jobs, I think both of my promotions I didn't get. The managers hired me, but on the second job. So in other words, I applied for one of their positions and I always ask for feedback. If they offer it, I always take them up on it. If they don't, then I always ask if they can provide me feedback on my interview, so I know how to interview again. But they also are telling you how to get a job with them next time. And they actually both reached out to me and in both of these situations and just said, hey, heads up, I just posted another job. Now, unfortunately, we had someone else that was more qualified that got this, but this, just like I didn't get a promised job. They just said, hey, if you want to apply, take a look at it, and I applied. I came back stronger. I interviewed well, and I got the job, both of those promotions. The second time around, both with different managers, but the same ones. You see,
But I think you have a great call out. Having those connections and them just having the notion to think of you, I think is really enough, because you probably wouldn't have even really seen that come across. If like, oh, I guess that did pop up. Especially with state jobs. Sometimes there's just so many positions. Sometimes you just get so flooded, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And you've already made that connection with them. So and I felt more comfortable coming into the interview because I've interviewed with them once. I know exactly what they're looking for. And sometimes they'll tell you, you didn't give me enough information about this, or, you didn't have enough experience in this. Well, go try to find that experience, go try to take some trainings, go do what you need to do. And then that way, if you do interview with them or anyone else for that type of job, you're filling in those blanks and coming stronger every time you interview again.
Yeah,
Thank you, Erika.
It's great insight.
Yeah. I see one more question popped in from Elaine. So she asks, have you ever had experiences with sexism or racism within a professional setting? And if so, how did you handle it? I'm trying to get into tech currently and wondering what to expect. If any one of you like to go first.
I think that there's always good and there's always bad, and it's in tech and everywhere. I think that that's a reality. I started in tech when tech, it was not even that much, so even fewer women. So for sure, I feel like they would look at me and they would be like, you're too young. There's always a stereotype. You're too young. You're a woman. You're Latina. You're something. So I have experienced that in the past, both at some point in my career. But what I did was just, it did bother me. And at some point, it was something hard to deal with because obviously, when you also are a human, right? You're not a robot. So, but what I tend to do is just like separate myself from the situation. Data, this is a project. Some people are not going to change. So what is the best thing for you? What can you control? You're going to do your job the best way you can. You're going to document. You're going to bring your best set. And eventually you're going to move to a different role where maybe you're going to have a better place to work with, maybe where people are more comfortable with you, where there are not those bias. I have seen it everywhere, to be honest. I have talked to a lot of people. So I think it's a hard situation, but having a network, having friends, having people to talk to, having a mentor, and really having your path, because at the end of the day, you have your goal, and your goal is to be in tech and to have that role. And you can just be temporary there and then say, okay, I've learned, it's time to move on, and then you move on, and it's just an experience.
Yeah, and I would add too, if it's really bad, like know your rights. If you need to bring in unions or you need to bring in whoever you need to, like, don't let people walk all over you. I think as women, we take more than we should. I've been in awkward situations where, yes, I've normally left the job, but there's been other situations where I've had to stand up for myself and tell people this is not like a behavior that is professional. And sometimes you kind of have to play hardball back. That wouldn't happen probably male to male or, so you just have to, I've documented too. I'm HR. So like I think of document just in case it gets weird and you got to bring in the big guns. Yeah. Like you bring in the big guns and then you're like, you have all those stories that you can talk about. But if it ends up, fizzling out and they respect you, then, just I've always just kind of let it go, but I've prepared myself just being in civil rights too, you can push me around for a little bit, but eventually I might bounce back and come back with like laws and regulations and stuff like that. So that's just, I usually try to use those to protect me.
Yeah, no, I can 100% get on board with that. It's scary.
Yeah, if it happened to a man, they'd report it. So just like, why are we not?
Yeah. And I think it's great to hear that, that other people experience that too, because I know there's been a lot of times where I've just been kind of just shocked at people and the audacities they wish to take. So it's nice knowing that other people kind of have those moments where they're just like, oh, should I report or should I not? But yeah, how are we looking on time, Jody? Do we want to go a little bit further? I know we're hitting it a little bit. We still got some great questions in the chat too.
Why don't we take 2 more short questions? It's because I hate to leave them lingering.
Yeah, I think there's just one last question I see. So I think maybe this is to Erika because she was talking about the interviews and getting the feedback. So Emiko asks how to get the feedback, and I ask every time, but I never get it. Any ideas on how else to improve in interviews?
I do mock interviews a lot, like get some friends together, somebody who that you think interviews well, to give you feedback and have them give you some questions. You give them questions, practice and practice and practice. Like record yourself, do questions in front of the mirror. This is not the time to be shy. This is the time. And I've always told, women too, we tend to be a little bit more humble and shy. But in interviews, all I tell people is all you're doing is telling your story. Just like today, like me and Stephanie, we're not sitting here saying we're like the greatest, IT women. All we're doing is just telling you our story, like what we've done, and we're being honest. Like we're not saying what we have. We're not inflating anything. We're just being honest. So when you have a good resume behind you, it's easier to just say it instead of trying to figure out oh my goodness, what are they looking for? Just tell them who you are. Tell them what you've done. Tell them I always say, write your accomplishments down. I write everything down. I categorize all the areas that I'm trying to, so I look at what they're looking for, right? I categorize those on like, in a Word document. Then I have stories and examples for each one of those. I memorize those. So now I have my stories and my examples, because I get really nervous in interviews where I can just like fall apart. But if I've studied it enough and have practiced enough in front of people, then I'm less likely, even if I get nervous, I could just regurgitate my stories without having to let my nerves overwhelm me. So, oh yeah, somebody put in their SMART questions. Yes, SMART. So that's what the situation, what is that? Is that the SMART, right? The situation and your, like, what tasks did you do? Or is that the other one? STAR. I'm thinking of the STAR method.
That was
Really
the
good
star, I
start.
think.
Yeah.
STAR is the situation, what tasks you did, what actions did you take, and what was the end result. Like, brag about the results. You really want to say, even if it wasn't 100% successful, what role you played in it and what was the end result at the end. Were you there to see its success? What kind of numbers did you change? Was there a success rate attached to it? Then you're painting that picture. When you're in the interview, they know nothing about you. Your resume is, only gives so much information. So all you're doing is having a conversation like we are now and talking to them about what you've done in your past.
Thank you,
Stephanie
Erika.
wants-
Stephanie, if you want to add anything to it. And you guys want to share any resources to do any mock interviews, and like besides friends, do you guys have any websites?
Yeah, actually, I used to mentor some college kids for Santa Monica College, and I was part of the interview. And I think that it's very key to prepare, because obviously it's nervous. And as Erika was saying, they're just people. So I always tell my mentees, practice with the mirror. Sometimes the more you say it, the easier. Have your answers and questions and everything organized. Another thing is that sometimes we're nervous and we need a little minute. That's something that I personally do. So when I'm nervous and I need a second to think, I always have water. So I'm like, okay. And while I'm drinking, I'm like thinking about it. Another thing is that be prepared. It's important that you look good, your background, everything. If you go to the place, like you go for in person, try to be early, not be late, try to be formal. Check, I mean, it depends on the company. When I interview for this gaming company, obviously I was not looking like this. I was looking more normal. So I was like, I don't want them to think that I'm not fun. But I think another thing is that it's also good to say, you know what, that's a great question. Let me think about it and I'll get back to you. And you do that. I think it's very important. Something that it comes from my Latin roots is that I always treat people like people. The recruiter, I always try to make a connection with that person. It's important to, when you're in an interview, say the name of the person. Hi, Jessica, nice to meet you. Very nice to be talking to you. Then you already made that connection. If you have the time to research something, sometimes you can have something in common with that person. At some point, the person that was going to interview me had worked at Hewlett Packard as me. So I was like, and we had kind of like the same type of project at some time. So I used that in my conversations to say like, oh, I did this and did that. So there was a connection there. Another thing is that I think that you have to bring energy. It's not the same if you're sad. Like, hey, I would love to do this. I would like to do that. This is what, like, energy always triumphs. And I think that also asking questions. Most of the time, something that I've seen from a lot of recruiters that I work with is that people don't ask questions, and they do feel like, oh, this person is interested because they, as Jody was saying, they research the company, they know what this is about, they know what my vision, why do you want to be here? Just because I want to be in tech? It's hard to, it's our baby. We're inviting you to our family. So we want you to be excited about it. And I think, and also it's hard. It's very hard. You're putting yourself out there. I know it's kind of complicated. There are good people that interview. There are some that are kind of rude. Don't take it personal. It's part of learning. As Erika said, the next time you're just gonna do it better. And whenever I'm very sad, I just put red lipstick and I'll just go for it. So we're here for you. And if you feel like you cannot do it, well, all of us here, we will be cheering up for you.
That's awesome, Stephanie. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I agree with that.
Yeah.
No such thing as a bad question. And remember, you're also interviewing them too. So that's a really great thing.
Yeah. And I see one more question. So Nadine asks, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong, sorry. So any suggestions for immigrants to get tech jobs when living in the USA?
I can speak from my
Yeah.
experience, but maybe
Yeah,
Erika
please.
can tell us like her HR because it's different. In my personal role, since I have been a senior for a while, I was already in the States and I did all the paperwork without any companies, which is complicated. And then even then I had to have a certain level of immigration that I didn't know of. So that's why I created my own company. At some point I was not getting jobs. So I was like, I'm just gonna create my company. It was COVID as well. And I just wanted to learn more about software development. So I created a company about those QR codes that were very hot at the moment. I became a designer because I didn't have money to hire a designer. So I was like, I'll do it. And it was a lot of fun. And then with that experience, and I already had the paperwork, well, honestly, it was a lot easier. I do have friends that have had a different path because they do not have paperwork, so they want to get. There are a lot of companies that provide that sponsorship, but the reality is that it's not that easy. I would suggest you get something in whatever country you are before you come into the States. Because when you're here, it depends on the country you're from. You have certain limitations. Something that I have seen, it's not my personal experience, but I have seen working very well is people coming here, studying here, and then getting into an internship. For example, in my company, they have a lot of amazing programs where there's internships, there's rotational programs where they put you, like when you're out of college, they put you in different projects. So you get to learn a lot of things. I didn't know that back in my day. So I think that's something amazing. So I would say if you can, better do that route, study, you learn. It's easier. Also, you get to understand more the country itself. You already get connections and then apply to those internships. And then you have that foot on the door, you're the best, and then you make them hire you. And honestly, there are the big companies, they do have those sponsorship programs, but it's not as, to be honest. I hope that helped.
Yeah, no, that
Thank
was
you,
great.
Stephanie, for that.
I was-
Erika, do you want to add something to it?
I don't have too much to add. I haven't done that so much in the private sector. I just know in the public sector, you have to have like you have to live here in California and have like an SSN card. So those are limited, at least with like we can't even live in a different state. So at least for like civil service jobs, but I'm sure, you know, Stephanie gave some good advice, and yeah, maybe there's like visa programs, like I said, and I agree with her. Just try to learn as much as you can. If you can't, you know, come over to the States right away and just make yourself super marketable that people are willing to bring you back, bring you on board, you know.
Yes. Volunteering also. I make a project and then they're like, let's bring this person. I don't know.
Like me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know sometimes, you know, things happen in mysterious way in different pathways. So, you know, I encourage everyone in the room to definitely just, you know, put it out there, and worst case scenario, you know, you just won't hear anything, but you know, clearly something will stick eventually and something will happen. But no, that was some great insight from you amazing ladies. I'm so glad to have everyone here. And do we have any more questions, or how are we looking?
I think we covered all the questions from the chat.
Alrighty. All right, well, I believe that's pretty much time. How are we looking, Jody?
Yeah, I think we should wrap this up. I'm gonna stop the recording.
Yeah, no problems.